Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. So I want to speak about tonight a topic I've been speaking a lot about over the last month here in Tiru, which is that there's a particular quality in the nature of consciousness itself that I want to point out. I want to bring light of awareness on this unique quality inherent in the mystery of consciousness, which I find endlessly fascinating and compelling and inspiring and mysterious. So consciousness, as all of you know already, is the ground of all being. It's the foundation of the totality of all reality. And what consciousness is a mystery. Nobody knows really what consciousness is. So what we're calling consciousness is ultimately a mystery, ultimately unknowable by the rational mind. But we can say for sure that it is the very ground of all of our experience in every moment. Without consciousness, the world will disappear, the universe will disappear. And to become aware of the nature of your own experience of consciousness in the present moment, and you just start paying attention to your field of vision and see everything that's appearing before you, the computer screen, the objects in the room that you're sitting in, the form of your own body, your own thoughts, everything that you can see, taste, touch, smell, and feel is all appearing within a field of consciousness, of conscious awareness, but more specifically consciousness itself. It's everything that appears is appearing in some infinite space, which is not a space, it's a no place. It's an infinite empty ground, it's an infinite emptiness. And the point that I want to make, what I want to make clear is that the mystery of the emptiness that is the heart of consciousness, the mystery of this mystery is a particular quality of intentionality, of sentience, of care. Consciousness is, when a lot of us think about consciousness, a lot of people think about consciousness but don't actually know what it is. We often presume we know what it is when we're using thoughts to think about, but when you can't really think about consciousness with thought, because consciousness is not a thought, it cannot be contained in thought. But many people unknowingly think about consciousness as a big cloud, something synonymous with a big cloud, an infinite cloud of stuff that's empty and infinite. So it's almost to put it in a materialistic context, consciousness could seem like an infinite cloud of empty stuff that's empty and has no content, but exists everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It is infinite and in all places simultaneously. It is in itself no thing whatsoever. It is a something that is a nothing. And that's very hard to understand with words. What is a something that's a nothing? And in this case, it's a something that's a nothing that is the very ground of your experience of being human. For all of us, knowingly or unknowingly, consciousness is the very ground of our experience of being a human being. Most of us are not aware of this ground of our experience because we are not focused on the nature of consciousness or its infinite ground in our experience of infinite awareness, but it is the content of consciousness that we mostly focus on. And as most of you are well aware, the content of consciousness is thoughts, feelings, memories, fears, desires, opinions, beliefs, worldviews, etc. It's what we think. It's what we think about consciously and unconsciously all the time. And from the perspective of enlightened awareness, thoughts are mind objects. When you look at thought as thought and not as particular thoughts, but thought as thought, you can recognize thoughts to be mind objects, objects that appear in this infinite ocean, infinite sea of consciousness itself. So because unknowingly our attention is focused on the objects that appear in consciousness and not on consciousness itself, we miss its infinite nature. And the awakening to enlightened awareness, the glimpse of enlightened awareness, the experience of satori and samadhi and spiritual illumination is usually when we glimpse suddenly, in a great moment of recognition, when our attention shifts from being focused on the content of consciousness, which is mind objects, to the infinite nature of consciousness itself, that we experience enlightened awareness. And enlightened awareness emerges when we discover the eternal, timeless, formless, beginningless and endless ground of our own conscious experience. When we discover its eternal and infinite nature, that's the discovery of enlightenment. And that's the recognition that the ground of our experience in every moment is eternal and infinite. And the conscious recognition of that which is eternal and infinite, conscious experience of that which is eternal and infinite, is inherently and absolutely liberating, because the conscious experience of a conscious awareness that's focused on mind objects and egoic perspectives and feelings and thoughts and memories and stories is not an experience of freedom. There's usually an experience of constriction, fear, and imprisonment, spiritual imprisonment, psychological, emotional imprisonment, psychic imprisonment. So the recognition in the spiritual awakening, the recognition that the ground of our experience is infinite and eternal and absolute, is the experience of coming out of a mind prison and discovering that our eternal nature, the very ground of our own being, the very ground of our own self-feeling, the very ground of our own self-experience in every moment, is eternity and freedom without limit, which is wonderful. And may we all become perfectly enlightened in this life, sooner rather than later, I hope. Let's not postpone it too much longer. So what I wanted to say is that consciousness, what we're speaking about consciousness here as this eternal ground, this infinite ground of our experience, which we can metaphorically use thought to imagine is an infinite cloud that exists everywhere and nowhere of something that's nothing. This infinite cloud that's something and nothing is not static. Often when spiritually minded people or people who meditate describe the nature of being, the nature of the experience of being, the conscious awareness of this feeling of being, they describe a state of consciousness which feels and sounds very static. That the experience of being sounds like a static state. It's a static state of consciousness where there's a vibration of existence and non-existence. There's a vibration of absolute freedom. But the vibration of being, or the feeling of being, it sounds like static and one-dimensional. It feels like this static being may exist everywhere and nowhere, which is quite extraordinary. May exist everywhere and nowhere, but its nature, the nature of the feeling of being, sounds like it's static or one-dimensional. In other words, existing everywhere and nowhere eternally for eternity in all directions, but is itself static and unchanging. And I've come to understand, and I've had this experience many times, and it was what I wanted to share with you, is that consciousness, the nature of consciousness is not static. And that there's a mystery inherent in the presence of consciousness, the experience of consciousness, the nature of consciousness, which I could describe as something like it's a form of sentience, it's a form of consciousness, it's a form of sentience, it's a form of there's an aspiration in consciousness. I am boldly declaring in front of all of you that consciousness is not passive. And inherent in consciousness is an aspiration, is a desire, is a compulsion, which wants and if even as it desires its own recognition in other conscious beings, in conscious beings. Because as you can understand from the perspective of the infinite nature of consciousness itself, we all have the capacity for self-awareness. We all have the capacity for cosmic consciousness, for infinite self-awareness, but most of us are so caught up in the contents of our mind and the story of our egos that we tend to miss out on the fact that consciousness is seeking for our own recognition of it. The infinite nature of your own consciousness is mysteriously and inconceivably seeking for your own recognition of it. It's looking for you, waiting for your own recognition of it. But most of us don't recognize that consciousness is seeking for us because we are so distracted, as I've been saying, by the mind objects, memories, fears and desires of the conditioned mind and small self. So this is why when someone has a spiritual awakening, that's when consciousness recognizes itself within the individual. And the experience is very dramatic because this is when it seems like that which is infinite recognizes itself in the uniqueness of a singular mind, body, personality of an individual. So the infinite awakens to itself in and through our unique personality, and this is a cosmic happening, a cosmic event. The consciousness recognizes itself in us and through us. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's a quality in consciousness, in the infinite nature of consciousness. It is not static, but that is very much aspiring, I could say. I'm reaching here, but it's very much aspiring and desiring that you and I, and that we, all sentient beings, would become conscious of consciousness. That it seems that inherent in the nature of consciousness, embedded in the nature of consciousness, is this deep desire, compulsion, aspiration, mysterious aspiration, that we, who are so close to this awake state, would actually awaken and become aware of the infinite nature of the ground of our own being and the infinite nature of consciousness itself. And the simple point I'm trying to make is that consciousness itself very much is desiring this to happen. And I've witnessed this in myself. I've witnessed this in other people and in groups of people when consciousness becomes self-aware. The shared delight that seems to be almost instantaneously awakened in so many people is quite overwhelming and disarming. But the simple point I'm trying to make, which is so important, is that consciousness itself is not static being and non-being. The infinite level of consciousness is not static. But there is a pulsation, a vibration, a evolutionary aspiration inherent in the nature of consciousness itself. It's seeking for its own self-recognition in you and in me, which is the best news that there is, that I can imagine being able to give all of you. That your own experience of consciousness is not passive, that your own consciousness in this very moment was waiting for you to recognize it and want you to recognize it. But as I keep repeating, this doesn't usually happen very often because we're so distracted by the contents of our mind objects that we're so distracted by and focused on all the time. But when we have a moment where we've lapsed attention and when we stumble upon the infinite nature of our own consciousness, we can suddenly wake up and realize the consciousness has been waiting for this moment, waiting for us to wake up. I remember when I experienced my own awakening after I met my guru in 1986. I went through a period of about 3 weeks where the miracle and mystery of the infinite nature of consciousness had revealed itself very dramatically inside my body, mind, and personality, and my nervous system was in a very heightened state. So I could suddenly feel the very force of this, the nature of consciousness itself had become activated in me in a very powerful way. And ever since then, I've been a different person living in a different universe. I might look the same, but I'm not the same person as before that event happened. So once again, I'm asking you to imagine the possibility that inherent in the nature of your own experience of consciousness, which is timeless and formless and beginningless and endless and eternal, that the eternal ground of your own being, which is consciousness, is not passive, but embedded in the nature of consciousness itself. It seems to be, for sentient beings at higher levels of complexity in consciousness and cognition, this built-in aspiration for this awakening to consciousness itself, the self-recognition to happen inside us individually and collectively, which means consciousness is waiting for us to wake up and to recognize who it is. And when we recognize who consciousness is, what consciousness is, we recognize ourselves. That's the illumination. That's the enlightenment, and it's profound and quite miraculous. So if what I'm saying is true, if what I'm saying is true, and I have no doubt that it is true, this should give you a lot of faith about your own chances to awaken. Because if what I'm saying is true, and it is true, it means that we're not alone in this endeavor for seeking for to awaken to enlightened awareness. Well, none of us are alone. That the deepest dimension of the deepest dimension of the universe, which is it's the interior of the universe, the inside of the universe, which is subjectivity, interiority, and consciousness. The deepest dimension of the interior of the universe is waiting for you to recognize it, and aspiring for you to recognize it, and wanting and hoping for that moment when you'll recognize your own true nature and join the awakened consciousness with your own consciousness and become part of this awakened state that exists in a few people on the planet. So as a true seeker feels that he or she is seeking for enlightenment, seeking to become more conscious, but in fact, consciousness is seeking for us always. This is something we're usually not aware of, we're not conscious of, we're not cognizant of. The consciousness itself is seeking for its own self-recognition in us, seeking for us to recognize it. And when we recognize the nature of consciousness, the infinite nature of consciousness is the ground of our own being, in a mysterious way, the nature of consciousness itself becomes more powerful, more profound, more intense, more alive, stronger, and more potent. Please understand that our participation in the spiritual life, that your participation and my participation and our participation in the spiritual life, our active participation in the spiritual life, in the cultivation of consciousness and the cultivation of the capacity for consciousness, has an effect on the material layers and levels of reality. That when you awaken your own when you awaken to consciousness and discover the infinite ground of your own consciousness, the infinite ground of consciousness itself, where consciousness, whatever it is, and as I said before, nobody knows what it is. There's an intensification in the nature of this mysterious ground of being. There's an intensification and an intensification and a growth and a quickening. The universe becomes more conscious through you in that moment, through me. As we awaken to the infinite nature of consciousness itself becomes more potent in the universe. So please understand that there's a grand interplay here between your own spiritual seeking, your own aspiration for this deep and profound transformation at the level of consciousness, and the capacity of the universe to become more conscious inherently in itself. So in my understanding, our aspiring towards greater consciousness, our earnest aspiration towards greater consciousness is the most profound way we can participate in the gift of life. Because as I've been saying, as you become more conscious, the universe becomes more conscious through you. And it's not metaphorically, but literally and absolutely. And when you experience the truth of what I'm saying in your own experience, you'll start to feel you're participating in the life process at a much deeper level, at a level that's much more grand and sublime and meaningful and purposeful and deep. So inherent in the mystery of consciousness is this mysterious, loving aspiration that you and I would become conscious so we can awaken to the ultimate truth of the infinite nature of the ground of our own being. And so therefore, as I've been saying, we're not alone in our spiritual aspirations here. We're not alone. The universe has not left us alone, but is waiting for us to wake up. It's hard to believe in the mystery of consciousness because it's so subtle, it's so profound, it's so ungraspable by the mind. That's why when we awaken to it, we often lose touch with it. So, but when you have this kind of when you discover not only that you're the infinite nature of the ground of your own consciousness, when you discover not only that which is infinite, but that inherent in that which is infinite is this mysterious, loving desire that you should awaken. It gives rise to an enormous amount of spiritual self-confidence and gratitude and awe and wonder, the nature of existence. But the universe at its deepest and most subtle levels is on our side. And it's on the side of consciousness itself, even though it doesn't seem apparent most of the time. When you discover this is true, it gives you a lot of confidence, a lot of spiritual self-confidence, a lot of love for life, and a lot of gratitude for the gift of life. And it awakens a desire to participate more fully in the life process, more fully, more rigorously, more with greater commitment, because you realize how much is at stake here. And then one feels a reluctance to live a life of passive participation in life, but one begins to feel a desire for a much greater, much more committed participation, much more conscious participation in the gift of life. And if you're lucky enough, which you might be, if you're lucky enough to awaken in the profound way that I'm speaking about, as you become more conscious of consciousness and consciousness becomes more conscious of its own nature through you, you'll start to feel in yourself a mysterious desire that other people would awaken just like you have. It's a strange kind of spiritual longing that you'll have. That's when you begin to feel like a bodhisattva, and bodhisattvas are individuals who are no longer living for their own awakening or living for their own sake, but they're living so that the universe shall wake up through them. So a bodhisattva begins to feel this mysterious aspiration that others should awaken in a very powerful way, because the nature of consciousness has become so powerful in and through their own self-aware state that they begin to feel what consciousness feels, which is very impersonal, which is very transpersonal, which is very absolute. That's when you begin to care about consciousness more than you care about anything else. And then you begin to care about other people's consciousness, for better and for worse. For better and for worse, you begin to care about other people's consciousness and begin to care about people's capacity for awakening to become more conscious, because you can feel in your own awakened state that the universe seems to be desperate for more of the mystery of self-aware consciousness to emerge in this mysterious process called life. Consciousness is longing for its own self-recognition, its own awakening to itself. And when you become aware of this in yourself, you begin to feel these feelings yourself. You start to become an agent of consciousness itself, because consciousness now is a palpable feeling experience of knowing, a feeling experience of constant knowing that exists inside you. That's what you've awakened to. You're constantly aware of what the stakes are. So when your engagement with other sentient beings, with life itself, with other human beings, you see it less as a personal process, as a personal relational process, whereas the game of consciousness and consciousness is playing with all of us. You can feel, are other people conscious? Are they as conscious as you are? Are they less conscious? And how does that affect the nature of their ego and personality in relationship to life, their values? One becomes very sensitive to these things because one can feel the vibration of the infinite nature of the ground of one's own being, the nature of consciousness itself. We get to feel it so much more palpably in ourselves. We become much more sensitive to the nature of other people's conscious awareness or lack of it. And we feel naturally drawn towards other people who are more conscious and feel less attracted to people that are less conscious. Because consciousness, whatever it is, whatever consciousness is, as I said, it's a mystery. Nobody knows what consciousness is. Nobody knows. But whatever it is helplessly, mysteriously, and gloriously attracted to itself. Consciousness is seeking for its own self-recognition, not only in us as separate egos, but as vehicles for conscious awareness. So consciousness is constantly self-seeking for itself and delighting in its own self-recognition in ourselves and in others. And the depth of human relationship, the spiritual depth of human relationship reveals itself when we have this experience that our relationships are vehicles through which consciousness awakens to itself and realizes itself and recognizes itself in the relational context. It's no longer a personal happening. Relationships are no longer for you, one who's awakened to the nature of consciousness itself. It's no longer personal events, but it's a vehicle for you to be able to meet others at the deepest level of feeling experience, which is infinite, the infinite ground of being. So I hope in the way I'm sharing this information with you that you can get a sense of a different kind of perspective on being conscious and on being yourself in relationship with other people. I hope you get a feeling for it, a sense of it. And what also happens when you awaken to the nature of your own consciousness in the way I'm describing is that you find yourself overcome by feelings of, well, let me say it's like when water boils. When water boils, it spills over the sides of the container that it's boiling in. So that's a feeling of being overwhelmed, that it's unbearable, it's too much. Because the experience of the nature of consciousness itself, when it's unadulterated, is the feeling of way too much. It's too much. And it's the feeling of too much love and bliss, goodness, truth, and beauty, positivity. One becomes overwhelmed on a regular basis by the too muchness of the nature of consciousness itself. And this always stops the music. It makes the music comes to a halt when you have to bear the unbearable nature of the truth of the too muchness of consciousness. And you become overwhelmed and come to your knees, either literally or metaphorically, and then when the intensity passes, you stand up again and continue on until the next moment of being overwhelmed by the too muchness of it all. So when you become a bodhisattva, you become a child of consciousness. You become a child of consciousness, a lover of consciousness, a devotee of consciousness. Now you find you're not living for the fears and desires of your ego anymore, but you're living for consciousness itself. Whatever consciousness is, and we don't know what consciousness is, you're living for the mystery of consciousness. You're being driven by the mystery of consciousness. That's what you're living for. Because now you have no choice because you found the ultimate truth. And that ultimate truth reveals itself to you over and over and over again and confirms its reality by these repeated moments of being overwhelmed by the bliss of it all, by the too muchness of the too much of the nature of spiritual love. And each time that happens, your mind is destroyed in the best possible meaning of what that, in the best possible sense of what that means. Your mind and ego disappears every time the water boils over. Your mind and ego get destroyed temporarily, and you find yourself lost in the mystery of consciousness, really, in the mystery of love, bliss, that is its nature. And every time this happens, every time your mind gets destroyed, mind and ego gets destroyed by this feeling of being overwhelmed, and the beauty of it all. It's like you're taking a bath. You're being purified by the intensity of the nature of this heart of consciousness itself. And so when you become a serious practitioner of enlightenment, of evolutionary enlightenment, of a radical transformation of the life of the Bodhisattva, these moments will come regularly. These moments of intensity will come regularly, and they will reinvigorate your spiritual conviction and revivify your spiritual intention, and they will bring you back down on your knees again and again and again and again and again, and destroy your mind and ego again and again and again and again. And people whose minds and egos have been destroyed by the love of consciousness itself are different. There's something different about them because now their ego has been displaced by the love of consciousness and the nature of consciousness itself. So the ego has become displaced. Doesn't mean it's gone. It's still lurking in the background, but it's no longer the dominant monad, as Ken Wilber would say. It's no longer the dominant monad in your experience. But it's a background player. And now the mystery and the miracle of consciousness itself has now come to the foreground, come to the center of your experience. And as I've been describing on this call, what comes to the foreground, as consciousness comes to the foreground of your experience, simultaneously is this mysterious aspiration. It's a bodhisattvic aspiration that other people should become conscious. We would become conscious also. The universe would become conscious also. The consciousness would experience its self-recognition through the eyes, mind, and heart of all sentient beings. This becomes a obsession, becomes a spiritual obsession, a choiceless choice, a choiceless aspiration that the universe should become more conscious through us. So consciousness can constantly experience this self-delight in its own constant self-recognition as other people awaken to this infinite nature again and again and again and again and again. That's what gives God, the God principle, so much pleasure and so much joy, is when we awaken to his or her infinite nature. That gives God the greatest pleasure. I don't know how I know this, but I know it. And if what I'm saying is true, and I do believe that it is true, life can begin to make sense in a very profound level, in a very profound sense, if you let all this in. I'm not exaggerating when I'm trying to describe the intensity of what I'm pointing to. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not over dramatizing it. But it's really true. But when you begin to live your life so that consciousness can evolve through you as you, for its own sake, the life of the small self has come to an end. Even though the small self still may be alive inside your body, mind, and personality, it's no longer the dominant part of your personality. It's a background player. And your love of consciousness, which is your love of God, has taken the front seat. Now you're living for higher values and higher principles and higher purpose, which is the evolution of the universe, the enlightenment of the cosmos. And I can't think of anything better to do than that. Now, I couldn't possibly be making all this stuff up, could I? Maybe I could. But I don't think so. What I like about this particular insight about the nature of consciousness, and that the fact that inherent in the nature of consciousness is this mysterious will towards greater consciousness in us, that the universe wants us to awaken for its own sake. I find this so absolutely inspiring and compelling and touching, because in our moments of greatest despair and confusion and isolation and nihilistic doubt and fear, we can feel very alone and isolated and lost in the material universe, and feel that there's no inherent care in this universe, and that we didn't ask to be born, and we've been thrust into this dangerous world where there's no inherent ground of love or meaning, which is how many secular materialists feel, and gives rise to nihilism and narcissism and metaphysical doubt and fear and grief. So, in the recognition of what I've been trying to describe on this call lies the remedy for our spiritual alienation from for so many of us. What is our experience of being spiritually alienated from our own inherent depth and inherently liberated nature and loving nature? It's a solution to being alienated from our own souls, really. As long as we feel alienated from our own soul, consciously or unconsciously, we're never going to be able to live life fully. Not in the way it was meant to be lived, anyway. That's why these kinds of insights, these kinds of recognitions, are so absolutely essential to be able to live a fully conscious life. And I wish for all of you to consider seriously what I'm saying, and consider that maybe what I'm saying is actually true. My guru told me a long time ago that the difference between enlightenment and unenlightenment is doubt. So this one expression of the proof of a stable enlightenment is the consistent demonstration of doubtlessness about enlightenment itself, not only in thought and word, but also in one's very in the nature of one's being. The nature of one's own being expresses a doubtlessness about the nature of consciousness, about the nature of God. That's when we kind of experience an existential relaxation that's based upon this deep embrace of life's deepest truth. And in that there's the coming home to reality at a much deeper and higher level, and that's when we embrace the challenge of being human in a whole new way. So my life's mission is to inspire as many people as possible to aspire to become bodhisattvas, because that's what this world needs now more than ever. And I realize that what I'm saying sounds very incredibly esoteric and incredibly out at the very edge of the possible when we're thinking about the nature of reality and the nature of love and the nature of spirit. That doesn't mean what I'm saying is not true. If you discover the value inherent in your own awakening and inherent in consciousness itself and become self-actualized, you discover the highest truth and the highest domain in which to realize the truth and in which to make sense out of the experience of being human. That changes everything. You begin living in a different room, a different corridor, a different portal than most people are living. You're living in a different world space altogether. It's an invisible world space, but it's an infinite and liberated world space where all things are possible and everything makes sense in ways that the mind can't even understand. I can hear in the echo of everything that I said that I was able to describe the, the a perspective on what it would be like to be a human being, having the experience of being a human being who's transcended the personal sphere of experience and ascended to a much higher level of consciousness. So we can wait. We can rest for a couple of minutes if we'd like to be quiet. And then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
I've got the question already, Andrew. Whenever you're ready, I can read it to you.
Okay. Okay.
So the question, or it's actually two questions, are from Yvonne DiGecco. She's asking, can awakening happen suddenly while you are going about your regular day, or only during meditation or spiritual practice?
Definitely suddenly.
And the second question is, would starting the day with an intention of reaching an awakened state help increase the likelihood of awakening?
Now, Yvonne, what do you think?
Yes.
Very good. Absolutely. That was easy.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And Adam would like to share an insight, Andrew.
As long as it's not too long, Adam. Can't hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Based on your talk, something came to me about a story in Greek mythology, and probably most people know what a narcissist is. And it's interesting because the story came about. There was a figure in Greek mythology that was with his girl, and he was by a body of water, and he looked at his reflection in the water, and he fell in love with it, and he dumped the girl. And that was the basis of the story. And it's interesting. It made me realize, based upon your talk, the title of the talk is that we have all done that in varying degrees. We have seen the image, the reflection of who we are as we really are, and it becomes a false identity. So my big challenge in life is that these false identities have made themselves real. So even though I know who I really am, the images keep on coming. And to me, that's the true definition of graven images. The idea is that we've created these false images and we've given meaning and importance to them, to everything that is not God. So that's what I see where the battle is, the big challenge is that, yes, I know who I am and I can rest in that state of being, but these false images have taken on their own identity, and it's kind of like a force and program of their own. It's like it's saying, well, I don't want you to wake up because I don't want my false identities to die.
That's the force of the ego.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you're describing it very clearly and you're being very articulate about it. But you said 3 times, I know who I am. And I would lovingly challenge you on that point, because I would say if you really knew who you were, you wouldn't be so overwhelmed by the egos insisting on being in the driver's seat.
Well, maybe it's better to stay a glimpse of who I am.
That's better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's I have glimpsed who I am, and I realize that my ego, as a result, I realize my ego is a false impersonator of my true self.
Yeah.
But then we have to, Adam, I would wholeheartedly encourage you to dedicate yourself more wholeheartedly to transcending the grip of the ego.
Yeah.
Because you know what? It's possible.
Yeah.
Adam, I tell everybody 2 things. I say, if you want enlightenment, there's 2 things are necessary. First, you have to believe that it exists. And enlightenment exists as an available state of consciousness that's constantly available to all of us. It exists, it's like believing in God, that God exists. If I believe in enlightenment, I believe that it exists and it's available. The same way that a Christian believes that God exists. I believe in enlightenment. And the second is we have to believe in our own worthiness, our own capacity for higher consciousness, our own capacity for transformation. We have to believe in our own worthiness, our own spiritual worthiness. I believe I've got what it takes to let go of my mind and ego and embrace the ultimate truth of non-duality as myself.
Yes.
I am worthy of spiritual liberation in all my imperfection. In all my imperfection, I am worthy of spiritual liberation. So we have to believe in enlightenment itself. We have to believe in our own capacity to embody it.
Yeah. And I think that's what it seems like. It appears to be a paradox anyway, is that there's this deep belief or this very strong spiritual self-confidence in that. But at the same time, the key, you said, unworthy, there's something in me that feels that I'm worthy. That's what creates the self-doubt and wanting to sabotage.
That part of the self has got to take a hike.
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
This part of the spiritual life, Adam, is a battle or a war. I hate to say it, but it's true. It's about making the right choices. Do I choose my ego or choose my true self? Because it's the true self, the liberated state of the true self is a higher state of consciousness, but it's also a choice. Because then you have to realize that the ego has no power over you if you choose the true self again and again and again and again and again. The ego has no power to destroy your life or destroy anybody else's life. But if we allow ourselves to be intimidated by our egos, we can let it destroy our life and other people's lives too.
Yeah.
And try to think about this with a great sense of urgency about your own liberation. Remember, as apparently Ramana Maharshi once said, a true seeker after liberation has to want liberation like a drowning man wants air.
Yeah.
Or like the Buddha said, work out your own, to his monks, work out your own salvation with diligence. So there's a measure of urgency we all have to, I believe we need to embrace in terms of taking our own potential for enlightenment absolutely seriously.
Yeah.
Putting our cards on the table, saying, this is what I want, and this is what I'm gonna, why I'm alive, what I'm living for. And
I realize like that in my practice, in my development, I see that the ego has been so strong my whole life. I think with most people is because it's like it's taken a life of its own, and it's protecting me from something else. But then when I realize more and more that I am not the ego, then I realize that all the ego does really is cause me suffering. So at that point, it doesn't really have any use anymore.
Exactly. That's well said.
Yeah.
Therefore, we don't need it anymore. You can throw it in the garbage and throw it away. The negative ego is not our friend.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
The next question is from Rodney, or it's more a comment. I'm reading it to you. Your talk remind me of an experience I had in meditation about 20 years ago. My mind was still and empty of content, seemingly only aware of awareness. The question entered my mind, what would it be like to be trapped in this empty space for eternity? I instantly felt joy, indescribable, and a confident sense that I would never ever lose that sense of rapt fascination. I would never regret it if trapped in this way. Instead, it was freedom.
Beautiful. You just confirmed everything I said, brother.
The conversation you just had with Adam was very helpful to me because the process of embodying that continuously is always has been for me the challenge and the opportunity. And what you said, we um, had to allow within ourselves in order to create space for continuous embodiment, for willingly being trapped or choosing that space is what you were describing. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And remember, Rodney, that we're all imperfect vehicles. So the state of enlightened awareness is the experience of perfection, because consciousness is inherently perfect. And the consciousness or consciousness of consciousness is the conscious recognition of the truth of perfection, which is inherent in the nature of consciousness. So that means we can experience perfection as the nature of our own consciousness, but as an embodied four-dimensional human being, we can never experience perfection because we're inherently imperfect. So we can experience perfection, but we can never be perfection. That's the way. That's the situation here. So when you realize that we can aspire towards perfection, but we can never reach perfection as an embodied expression of enlightenment, as close as some people may be able to get, it can be a big relief, a metaphysical relief, to realize that manifest perfection is not the goal of enlightenment. And we can forgive ourselves. We can all forgive ourselves for being imperfect because we're part of an evolutionary creative process, an evolutionary process that's in progress. So we're all, if we're practicing the spiritual disciplines in earnest, we're aspiring for improvement and for self-betterment. But we know we're never, as hard as we may try, we're never going to become perfect as manifest individuals. But there's infinite room for improvement, but we can experience the perfection of our own true nature. And when you experience the perfection of our own true nature, that's what becomes the source of our inspiration to continue to consciously evolve. So don't get too hard on yourself for not being perfect.
It can be a North Star, perhaps, a guide.
Yeah, exactly. But it can be a North Star. But the good news is that in the experience of the nature of consciousness itself, we can experience that perfection directly as our own true nature. And then it's not a North Star, but then we are the North Star when we're in that state of consciousness.
It is. Thank you. It's a subtle but really important shift that I hear you describing just now. Thank you.
Exactly. We want to hold the paradox.
Yes.
Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you.
The next question is from Marilyn. She is saying, I find transcendence of ego requires constant consciousness awareness of consciousness. You agree? Tough to achieve, no?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, I would say your just recent discussions with Adam and Rodney addressed my question. Like you said, we're not going to achieve perfection. We are human, but the desire to want to, be in consciousness constantly and being able to not be triggered and not have those false identities take over is something to just constantly be working on, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing is, Marilyn, that yes, we need to constantly be working on uh, waking up, being awake. But the more we experience the inherent perfection of our own consciousness as it always already is, it gives us more inspiration to practice being a better person.
I agree. I'm going to go meditate. Okay. Thank you for your help.
The next question is from Ola. She is asking, very inspiring transmission, Andrew. Thank you. What would you advise in how we can overcome our compulsive nature and our negative choices in order to overcome and be the vehicle for consciousness? Is it wanting liberation more than anything else?
Yes. But all you already knew that.
I know
Right?
it, but I do, but I needed to hear it again. I needed,
Well,
these
as you've
days in
heard,
my life, I need to drive it home.
as you've heard me say thousands of times, the foundation of the spiritual life is the cultivation of the desire to be free more than anything else. It's called clarity of intention. I want to be free more than anything else now. So it's the foundation of the spiritual life lived in earnest, no?
Yes,
Right, Ola? Right, Ola?
absolutely.
Everything comes from that. Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I get married? Should I get divorced? Should I have a kid? Should I not? Should I spend my last billion, or should I keep it in the bank?
So true. And lately in my life, something has become more important than that. It's like I'm choosing that again and again and again to my detriment.
Oh, well, you can always go back. You can always switch channels. Nobody's perfect, remember. If you realize you've been making the wrong choices, you start making the right choices again. Right?
Right. It's easy, really, if you want to, more than anything else.
That's right, my dear, exactly. Exactamundo.
Back to Mundo. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, no more guilt and shame, please. You hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
The next question is from Pramod. How does one consciously become aware of the nature of consciousness itself? Is this something that develops in the mode of evolutionary enlightenment?
I sure hope so, Pramod. I sure hope so. I've dedicated my life to this teaching, which is all about helping people to awaken to the nature of consciousness, the evolutionary potential of consciousness, and the meaning and purpose of enlightenment in this postmodern world in the midst of a meta crisis. So, absolutely, 200% yes. This is all only about awakening to enlightened awareness, is it not? And putting it into action, living it. Right, Pramod? Isn't that why you're here? Does that mean yes?
Say yes. A resounding yes.
Thank you.
This was the last question, Andy.
Very good. That was nice. I very much appreciate everybody's sincere intention tonight. It's helped me a lot. You see, consciousness delights in its own self-recognition, so I'm feeling like I should get off the call, but I feel like I don't really want to get off the call because I'm enjoying sitting here with all of you in this higher state of consciousness that's delighting in its own self-recognition that we're all experiencing, right? So when consciousness begins to recognize itself, we become very happy and we don't want to move, right? Somebody say yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.